Sandland is an open-world action RPG developed by ILCA and published by Bandai Namco. It's an incredibly ambitious game with a ton of systems and a huge variety of activities like platforming, vehicular combat, racing, and even town building, set in a huge open world that's just waiting to be explored, both in desert as well as in forest form. And even though fully exploring these places took me over 40 hours of playtime, the beginning and the end of my playthrough didn't feel so different. And that was somewhat disappointing, as if the game had a lot of strong ideas, but failed to develop any of them enough. That said, as far as story and world building goes, this is one of the best expansions of an anime show that I have ever played, making it an absolute must-play for fans of Sandland, but a big question mark for everyone else. My name is Globku, and this is my review of Sandland. In Sandland, you play mostly as Beelzebub, Prince of the Demons, and follow the story of the show, but not to the letter. In the show, you meet this character Anne once you reach the forest line portion of the story. In this game, you meet her as soon as you're stealing your first tank. That's quite early in the story, and Anne stays with you for the rest of the game, playing a major role. Shortly after meeting her, you set up base in the town of Spino, which becomes your hub of operations for the rest of the game. So in between missions, you find yourself constantly returning here, customizing vehicles, visiting shops, and taking on side quests with the villagers. This is quite the deviation from the story that you've probably watched or read, and puts all the subsequent events in a different context. Now, if there was a moment in the show that you wanted to play, most likely it's still there. It's not like the story has completely changed, but the game has a different take on it. Something new for you even if you've already watched or read Sandland. In fact, if you already did, I think you'll appreciate the game even more, because it does such a good job of expanding that universe. Both the anime and manga are a bit short, and that leaves a lot of room for questions, and this game offers that expansion that you would want as a fan of the series. And it does that not only through this alternate take on the story, but also through the world itself that it lets you explore. Coming face to face with the royal capital, you realize just how massive it is, or the crater left behind by the Aquanium explosion back when Rao fought the Peachy. Something about the scale of it just hits differently once you're actually there. The story is as expected, accompanied by fully voiced cutscenes and dialogue scenes, and of course these story missions take you all over the world, offering unique challenges, unique boss fights, and unique dungeons with different mechanics. If you're looking for even more of the Sandland universe, there are a lot of side quests as well. All of them voice acted, every single one. I found them to be very well written for the most part. Some expand on the Sandland universe quite well, others explore the unique humor the show has to offer. There are always those missions that will feel more like filler than others, but most of them introduce new colorful characters that fit the universe quite well, and most of those new characters end up in that town hub once you complete their side mission. Some as simple NPCs, others might even open up a shop and give you access to new items. It's mostly through side quests that you can see your town evolve over time. Every little change in the town, every building, every feature, you know how it was built because you've done the quest to build it. There's not a lot of customization as far as the town goes. You can't really relocate shops or anything like that, but the side missions you complete are meaningful because they end up being real places in this hub that you are constantly revisiting. And even now, multiple hours after finishing the main quest, I am still completing side missions. This game doesn't just go beyond Sandland and into the forest land, it keeps the story going after the anime wraps up through side quests. And that's what I mean when I say that this game is a great expansion of the Sandland universe. And some of these side quests even have choices that are pretty significant. They can determine which character becomes a shopkeeper in your town, and in some cases can even determine whether a character lives or dies. This game can get pretty dark out of nowhere in side quests for some reason. As an expansion to the world of Sandland, this game is flawless, but it needed the gameplay to support it. And while the game certainly offers a lot in the gameplay department, each individual system simply does not evolve enough. The gameplay of Sandland starts very basic, and unfortunately remains very basic until the very end. When you start playing as Beelzebub, you figure out how to run around and double jump, and once you enter combat, you have a light attack and a strong attack. Also, you can dodge roll out of the way, and that's it. The biggest combat evolution comes with the first talent that you unlock for Beelzebub, which lets you have a different finisher by pressing the strong attack after a few light attacks. Basically, the single talent unlocks combos, and combat does not change significantly after that. A lot of the talents are going to give you more health or damage, but they don't necessarily change the way you play. Combat-wise, the one thing you unlock as you play the game are new special moves that you can use occasionally, but the basics of combat do not evolve, and that's too bad because you're stuck with them for 40 plus hours of game time. Now, to be fair, a lot of your playtime won't be done on foot, and combat does evolve quite a bit once you introduce vehicles, because there are actually a lot of different types of vehicles, and each one can be customized with a different primary or secondary weapons, plus unique abilities that each vehicle has on a cooldown. Even then though, despite having a ton of gear to collect and equip, most upgrades will only affect a vehicle's stats, and even when you get a different type of cannon for your tank, for instance, it's not like the strategy changes too much. You're still pointing your cannon and shooting to deal damage. Changing vehicles does change gameplay significantly, and there are a lot of vehicles out there to discover and craft, but if you have a favorite vehicle that you want to stick to, it's not going to change too much from the start until the end of the game. And I think a big reason why each individual fails to evolve in terms of gameplay is because your enemies also don't force you to evolve. In this game, hard difficulty simply means bigger numbers for your enemies. They deal more damage and they have more health, but they don't get more complex mechanically at all. For instance, no enemy tanks will know how to lead shots. They just shoot straight at where you are at a given moment. So if you're just moving sideways, you're gonna dodge every single attack. It's such a wasted opportunity because they are shooting slow-moving projectiles. You could easily make them lead shots and force the player to dodge them on reaction. And this doesn't just go for enemy vehicles. Creatures largely behave the same way. The strategy for winning combat is very straightforward from the start until the end of the game. Move sideways and shoot. Luckily, some boss fights can break this pattern and offer a more meaningful challenge, and once in a while you will find a new creature out there in the world with an attack pattern that you have never encountered before. But most of the time you won't be fighting against these unique encounters, which means most of the time is pretty boring. That's not to say the game is easy, it can be absolutely brutal in terms of stats. If you are reckless, you can get blown up in a matter of seconds, and if your vehicle explodes, it's actually an instant game over. But the solution to each situation is usually to just come back later once you're stronger and not getting better at the game mechanics. On top of this, your allies also have a talent tree with abilities. You can equip up to 4 of them and they can offer you support in combat or even repair your vehicle with the press of a button, and that does help with the variety of combat a little bit, but at the end of the day they are support abilities and they don't change the way you play too much. That's the core gameplay, but one of the best things about Sandland is how it will introduce new systems all the time. For instance, stealth. At any time you can hold down the left trigger and Beelzebub will sneak around. If you catch an enemy from behind, you can take them down with a quick jump scare. By holding down the button, you can also see which way enemies are facing through walls thanks to the color of the indicator above their head. But much like the rest of the game, the stealth mechanics are pretty basic and don't go beyond this at all. Getting spotted simply means the game will fade to black and respawn you somewhere else so you can try to stealth again. And funny enough, you do not make any noise when you're jumping around, so that's a nice bypass because this movement speed while stealthing around is just not it. During some dungeons, you'll also find some side-scrolling sections which reminded me of Nier Automata in spirit, but in practice your character's momentum is not carried into a jump, which is already jarring in 3D, but it's enhanced in these 2D sections. So if you're sprinting and hit the jump button, your momentum just stops. You're not gonna jump as far as you're expecting and it just feels terrible. Again, a good attempt at variety, but lacks the quality or polish to make it shine. And I guess that summarizes the gameplay as a whole. It's very clear that vehicles is where they spent most of their time, and the game is better when it allows you to be in a vehicle, which to be fair, is most of the time. It even has a lot of quality of life systems while riding vehicles. For instance, it lets you loot without exiting the vehicle. It even lets you change vehicles without having to exit one at all. It keeps these combat moments pretty dynamic. But at the end of the day, it's pretty much the same from start to finish. I just wish the gameplay actually evolved over time. It's not bad, but since it's nothing special either, over a 40-hour game, it tends to get pretty boring. And the open world activities that the game offers also don't do a great job of changing that. Like any good open world game out there, Sandland is full of incentives for you to explore it and activities to play in both the desert as well as in the forest. It takes a page out of the Ubisoft formula of placing multiple towers around the globe that once you fix, reveal the whole map and all of its locations of interest. Though weirdly enough, once you visit and completely loot one of those locations, they have no indication of being completed on the map, which can lead you to visiting the same cave over and over when you're looking for resources even though you've already looted it. The world is absolutely filled with treasure chests that contain materials and parts for your vehicle, and these won't be marked on your map at the start, not until you buy maps from my favorite NPC in the game, who is definitely not a demon, that is clearly a cat. that can fly. Scattered throughout the world are these ruins. By exploring them, you find a ton of chests that have ancient coins, and these are what you use to unlock these treasure maps at the Cat. That sounds like a pretty straightforward open world game. The problem is all of these ruins are the same. Their layout changes, but they reuse the same rooms over and over again for all the dungeons in the game. In fact, I couldn't even tell you if we are looking at a Sandland ruin or a Forestland ruin right now, because even moving into the Forestland does not change the ruins at all. And that makes the exploration part of the game pretty boring. All the caves are the same, all the rock formations that you gotta jump through are the same, all the ruins look the same, but you still need to loot those chests if you want to customize your vehicles, and that is so frustrating. There are also a lot of spots you can fast travel to, and the load times are fantastic on PS5, so fast traveling ends up being your main savior when it comes to completing quests. And other than just raw exploration, the game offers a bunch of open world activities, but I ended up feeling the same when completing all of them, which is they're fine. I can't really say a single one of them is incredible. It's more like, how was that race? It was fine. How was that bounty? It was fine. How was the stealth section? It was fine. It was the same as every other one. Especially because they recycle a lot of these side activities and make you replay the same content over and over again. Why do I have to defeat the same bounty multiple times, just increasing the level of the NPCs? It basically bloats every side activity, and if the combat helped carry it, maybe it wouldn't feel like busy work, but unfortunately it does. There's also a battle arena where the game has you replay all the boss fights that you found in bounties or in story mode, but at a higher level, which once again would be great if the combat evolved in any way. This, by the way, is a big part of your endgame content after you're done with everything else the game has to offer. Exploring the open world feels like busy work, which means playing a lot of this game feels like busy work. And I found myself getting pretty bored of playing Sandland when I was simply exploring and not doing the main quests. But this level of exploration is something that you must actually do if you want to fully explore all the customization options that this game has. And it has a lot of them. There is so much to customize in this game. As you expand your town, new vendors join, and even the vendors that have already joined might have new side quests that expand their item inventory and sell you more stuff. But at the end of the day, there are two major things that you can customize in Sandland, and that's your vehicles and your room. Let's start with the room. In your town, in the back of your garage, is a room that you can fully customize. You can change the wall colors, ceiling height, add light features, add new objects, you name it. You can really spend a long time making your room as pretty as possible, and you can even buy additional rooms which are not connected, which is a shame. But if you're feeling like customizing multiple different rooms, yeah, you can. There's a vendor dedicated to selling you room decorations, and you can find many of these room parts simply by exploring the world. Now, this is completely optional or useless, whatever you want to call it. There's no gameplay benefit to setting up your room, it's just there. This is something that if you don't want to engage with, you also don't need to. I think the customization is pretty good, but if you're driven by objectives, you won't find anything to do here. Vehicle customization is also incredible. You can obviously change parts around, as I mentioned. Having different primary or secondary weapons changes your vehicle in a gameplay sense, but you can also style it to your liking by coloring it however you want. You can have a single color for the whole thing, or you can color different parts differently. And it's not just solid colors, you can apply patterns and even adjust them to be more metallic or glossy. And after you're done with colors, you can also add decals. Just put these stickers on different parts. This customization actually evolves a lot throughout your playthrough, unlike the gameplay. You can find new colors and decals as you play the game, so it might be worth revisiting this shop once in a while. Something I definitely didn't do because the customization is lacking in a few quality of life features that at some point I just went full Star Wars and made all my vehicles belong to the Empire. I cannot be bothered to mess around with menus any longer. It is incredibly frustrating to craft different parts and upgrade your vehicle, and that has burned me on all the menu systems in Sandland. There are hundreds of materials that you need to keep track of, and you can craft a lot of them, but you need to visit specific vendors to do it. So you'll have to stop upgrading, physically move to another shop, navigate to the materials you need, which you must memorize, there's no shopping list or anything of the sort, craft them, go back to N, watch that slow zoom in cutscene again, so you can upgrade the vehicle further or craft new parts for your vehicle or whatever you're doing. Even selling outdated parts is an absolute pain, as you must do them one by one. There's no marking items for sale, there's no selling items in bulk, and there's also no buyback option if you sell something accidentally. For as much customization as there is in this game, it definitely feels very early 2000s when it comes to quality of life stuff navigating these menus. It's also pretty hard to tell when it's a good time to grind for materials, because sometimes you might be missing stuff that is locked behind story progression. Throughout my playthrough, I constantly ask myself, is this the time to make my vehicle stronger, or should I just keep playing the story? Usually the answer is just keep playing the story. But because it has so many options, your playthrough will probably look very different from any others. Not only because you customized your vehicles different, but also the vehicles you chose to take into the world might be different from another player's. So while this process definitely takes a lot longer than it should, if you're willing to commit, you'll definitely end up with something to your liking. I think this game looks great, for the most part. Even the lower quality cutscenes with simple dialogue make good use of camera angles to keep the scene dynamic and distract you from the fact that Beelzebub always crosses his arms with the same exaggerated animation. Yeah, you won't be able to unsee it now. And part of that is the character models are simply really good and detailed, or at least that's true for most of them. All the characters that have complex facial features like facial hair or a weird facial shape like a lot of the demons, those characters look really good. But simple characters seem to have a few texture or shader errors whenever they make certain expressions. That makes them look a little bit weird. Anne is the biggest culprit here, since she is on screen very often. The world itself is beautiful, even the desert, which, let's face it, it's mostly sand, but being this empty makes each landmark stand out that much more. And going from a desert to a cave or ruins provides a nice visual break from the scorching sun, but the forest is clearly the better looking of the two, which is expected. There's a lot more going on here, but they did a really good job making this environment look incredible, even if its narrow roads made this space a bit more frustrating to explore. And I also have to highlight the animation work done on all the vehicles. They're very goofy looking, even the heaviest tanks look like a bouncing toy sometimes, and that just fits the Sandland aesthetic super well. Some bots have so many moving parts that it is incredible how they manage to look this good while keeping controls super snappy. On the other hand, the soundtrack mostly goes by unnoticed. It's pretty minimal and does fit the vibe of the game more often than not, but very rarely does it add anything to it. It mostly just sits on the background, as it's been doing throughout this entire review. With that, it's time to take all of these factors in and finally score this game. If you're new here, my scores go from F all the way to A, and this is my score for Sandland. If you're a fan of Sandland, this game is a must-play. But Sandland feels like a new series, despite the manga being from the year 2000. And it's a bit slim on content, so big fans of Sandland are few and far between. This game made a really big bet that Sandland would blow up, and that fans would be wanting the kind of expanded universe that the game provides. And as a result, it neglected on creating gameplay systems that supported the whole experience. No individual systems are necessarily bad, but since they're all very basic, they just don't have the power to carry the game the whole way through. And it ends up feeling like a game of quantity over quality. It's doing a lot of things, but it's not doing any of them particularly well. A jack of all trades, but master of none. And that's my review for Sandland. If you've played the game yourself and would like to share your opinion on it, please let everyone know what it is in the comments below. So folks have my opinion from the video, but they can have yours from the comments as well. And for more Sandland, check out the demo gameplay right here. Thanks for watching. Bye.